We are here to bring you everything and anything surrounding Porsche. I'm Mike.
I'm Aaron.
And this is PCar Talk. Welcome to an episode of PCar Talk. I'm Mike.
And I'm Aaron.
Want to thank JRZ for being a sponsor of the show because they're plainly freaking awesome.
Yep.
Thank you, JRZ, for sponsoring us. They make phenomenal suspension products, off-road, on-road, track, you name it. I have suspension being made as we speak. Hopefully it'll show up in the next couple weeks, and we'll get it on, and we'll be able to talk in length about how well I like it. And
because he's going to love it.
I assume I will. I mean, I don't want to, overthink it, but let's be honest, it's going to be awesome. There's just no way around it.
Outside reservoirs.
Yeah. They make really, really cool stuff, and I'm really excited to get that car in the mountain this fall with this suspension setup on it. So really, really thank them for that. And they can do the same thing for you. All you got to do is contact them, and they will make it happen. Again, if you're an enthusiast, they are an enthusiast maker. So go ahead and support them because they're supporting us, and we appreciate everything JRZ does for us. Without further ado, moving on with the show.
Let's do it.
Porsche's testing a new Efuel right now. What does that mean? So essentially they're making a fuel that is made a different way. It's not made with gasoline or any of that kind of stuff. It's almost renewable stuff. So the Porsche Mobile 1 Super Cup, all the Cup cars running in this series this entire season is going to run this fuel. So it's pretty interesting. I thought this eFuel was going to be a long-term R&D. It was going to be a long rollout.
Yeah, we're not going to see it for a long time.
Yeah, they're using it right now as we speak. And actually, because this is maybe a week old news, they already ran a race with this stuff. So they made 34,000 gallons of this stuff already. And they partnered with ExxonMobil that's located in Chile at that plant there. Or I should say Chile.
Chile.
They made that. And so they're putting it in all those cars in that series. Now, they wanted to make... very clear that this is not the final form for this e-fuel. This is the first iteration, but they're expecting, even with this first iteration, it's 85% less emissions than current gasoline. I'm going to say that again, 85% less emissions than current gasoline. That's insane to think about that. So basically, whatever 85% it's coming out of that car, there's only 15% now coming out. So
that's going to make for a really cool hybrid 911.
Yeah, so Porsche's partnering with ExxonMobil on this project. I'm sure at some point Porsche will have their own plant, as we discussed on a previous podcast, built. So maybe that's why there's a partnership right now. So I'll give you the breakdown for the people that are on the chem side of the world or have that kind of brain that can follow this real fast. It's going to be basically this plant splits water into hydrogen and oxygen. And then CO2 is filtered out of the air and processed with the hydrogen to create a synthetic methanol.
Isn't that like sublimation? Isn't that the same thing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
From there, a non-shared, so this is in-house, so they couldn't share this. So ExxonMobil methanol process to gasoline takes place. What that is obviously can't be shared. So it creates renewable gasoline at that point. So it's burnable fuel after this process. Obviously, they can't share it for proprietary reasons because I'm sure everybody's probably chasing their tails trying to get this done as well.
Yeah, everybody's doing that. Yeah.
So very cool that this is happening. A lot of R&D it's probably still going to go into this. There was some pricing behind it because obviously we're in the U.S., so we do gallons. But they were saying as of right now, if this was sold on the street level, they're thinking what pricing would be behind this is about $2 a liter. I did the research we're paying about 92 cents a liter on premium right now. So it's almost double what premium would be.
Yep.
However, the point of this is it's going to extend combustion engines for a long time, at least in theory. Because if it breaks down to an EPA situation where you have a combustion engine and they're saying, well, your car cannot...
You just have to use this fuel.
You can't emit so much fortunately for Florida, we don't have those things, but you have to get tested every year. But if you're running this fuel and you're producing that much less, so it doesn't matter if you have a combustion engine if you're producing that much less
emissions. So what I'm hearing is I can run a race octane in my car and it's essentially being perfect. It'll probably run car efficient.
It's supposed to run cleaner, way cleaner, 85% cleaner.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't get any better than this, they're using it in actual racing settings. This isn't like some like, oh, we're going to just run some test laps. They're running it in a series, and they're requiring everybody in the series to run this fuel so they can do R&D on it.
So you think the electric car dies right now?
I don't know if it dies. I think it's and we talked about this before. I think they live side by side.
Yeah.
I think they have a coexist. And I think it's for the people who. There's a lot of people who just want that silence, and that's fine, and they want to run that, and we can get into the depths of why electric cars are bad for the planet too, because you got to bury that battery, and it's a bomb, and we all know that other stuff. And
but weirdly enough, it's going to do what we were talking about. Like, I think it's going to save their 70% of cars on the road, that type deal. It's going to save Porsche's entire market.
It's going to save their race program. It's going to save their GT cars. So this is. If this isn't impacting you as a listener right now, let it sink in for a minute, because what this is doing, this essentially, it exists already. And they just need to start putting us in stations, essentially, at some point, once all the R&D's done, and you can run this in your car. And if they're running it in race cars in a series, obviously your car is going to be fine with it. So this is basically... I don't know, kind of like a lifeline to keep combustion engines on the road for a longer period. Is it indefinite now? No, probably not, because there's still going to be some point in some world or some decade or era where a combustion engine is not going to be legal on the road anymore, just because they're going to say there's just no, maybe from a sound ordinance or whatever, there's like, no, your car needs to be EV, not even because of emissions, but just because of sound decibels or whatever they want to get into. Who knows what the rules will be. However, if it's just based off of emissions, meaning cars allowed on the road, if your car's only producing 15% of what it used to do as emissions, I think that passes almost everywhere, and even in the most greenest areas, right? Because
I would imagine so.
But there are some places like hoity-toity France, as we know, they've passed some interior law within Paris of saying zero combustion engines within the city ordinance. Whatever year they decided, I don't have the numbers, but like they've already decided that. So even with this fuel, you still couldn't run it because you have combustion engine.
Then electric cars are there.
Yeah.
Or no cars.
And this goes to the boating world, and more specifically to places like more Florida, I guess. If you do flats fishing and there's an estuary or preserve, and I fish a lot, so I know this, and this is pretty obscure knowledge, but there's a no wake zone, which pretty much a lot of people, if you've ever been on a boat, are very familiar with. But in all these other estuaries, there's a no combustion zone. So that means you have to run an electric trolling motor in those zones if you want to move your boat around, because it wants to protect the wildlife, because even if your boat is, and most boats, exhaust underwater. So it's putting exhaust fumes in the water. So essentially, they don't want your boat running at all, and you running your electric motor in these non-combustion zones. And usually it's shallow water fishing in Florida, in these areas where these estuaries and these fish lie in this shallow water when you go fishing for them. I would imagine, I'm comparing this, there's going to be places in certain cities where you're going to have a non-combustion car. And where does that work? Well, now the hybrid comes into play, right? The hybrid, if you can switch the combustion motor off and run those EVs, now your car can do dual duty. Now you're there and you're in the ordinance of the area, and you shut the motor off, and you have maybe 40 miles of non-combustion usage. So you can get into the city, and then you can get out of the city and fire the motor back up and do your thing. Or
stay in the city and just keep it. You can just do your commuting you need to do.
Yeah, what I'm saying is whenever your mileage is out, what I'm saying is when you go into these zones, I think what I really think what this is going to do is really pump up hybrid stuff in the future is what I really think. Where we should have been at anyhow in the very beginning, because honestly, most of these cars, they need both, in my opinion.
I was going to think, well, maybe we could skip it and not have a hybrid anymore. But then now that kind of makes more sense for larger cities with zero emissions.
Yeah, and non-combustion zones. Or whatever they just deem. It's the same thing, just called something else. I think it's... And then for the rest of us, that maybe you don't ever live in any of these zones or ever have to go into one of these zones, maybe you can have your air-cooled still and still be able to run it. But now you're running it cleaner as opposed to what you were running it before.
And in California, you guys won't be stuck with 91 anymore. Maybe you guys get your 93 or 100 or whatever the octane is.
Yeah, run a different tune on your car.
So that helps out a lot of people.
Yeah, run a different tune on your car. Obviously, very, very exciting stuff. A lot more stuff to come out with this car. I mean, excuse me, Fuel. Yeah, we're building cars already.
Mike's building cars.
In my mind, I am.
Cars, yeah.
But I think this is super exciting for, and if you're listening, obviously you're a car fan. You should be very excited about this because this is basically a golden ticket.
Did they go into any detail? Like, did they have to transform any of the fuel systems, or is this just it just works normal?
I think it works as how everything is right now.
That's
like
awesome.
Because they're not going to run special. These are the Cup cars that are running in the U.S. They're not running anything different, anything special. They're going to run all that stuff. So,
that's cool.
I guess yet to be determined because there's going to be R&D that comes out of this. It could grenade motors. We don't know this. Who knows the longevity on this? Yeah, maybe the car runs on it, but it only can run 100 miles, and then you throw a rod. Who knows?
You know, got service hours with your e-fuel.
The point is that it can run at all, and going down the road.
Well,
and
it's racing. That's the
exactly,
thing, yeah.
And that's why they're as Porsche always does.
Yep.
They test stuff in the race bed, and if it can last on the racetrack, it's definitely going to be fine on the road. So I'm thoroughly excited about this just because of what this means for us as we age, and then everybody else is aging and loving combustion on engines and sounds and things like that. In addition to that, if you're a race fan, to go a little bit further, what this could do for race series and endurance racing and Cup series and all this other stuff, that could still run combustion engines if this fuel provides what they think it's going to provide, and then we don't need to listen to these little whirs that go around the track and all this other fake stuff that ends up happening, where they make pump noise and all. We're just going to end up we're going to still hear real racing in 20 years and 30 years and all this kind of stuff.
E-fuel.
Exactly. And imagine what that could do for a series like IMSA, or like what that could do for the longevity of that series, and like places like Le Mans that are so historic, to not have to run electric cars out there and do away with all the race sounds and all that stuff. I mean, this really is it's insane.
I'm glad that Porsche's leading the charge. It seems like it.
It's the silver bullet if this thing passes all of the stuff they're hoping. I don't want to get too ahead of myself and saying it's going to be there. Obviously, there's still got to be some R&D, but it's really exciting that the fact that they're putting it in their race cars currently in this series, and this isn't some BS series. It's a legitimate series. And
the supplying of it all and all that type of thing now. But I mean, you would think they have some of that worked out if they're supplying it for a race series.
I mean, like they said, they have 34,000 gallons of it already. So, I mean, that's a lot. I know race cars burn a lot, but it should be fine for this series. And they're going to learn a lot. Again, like I said, I don't want to get too far ahead of things. It could blow cars up. We don't know. We don't know. But the important thing is at least they're trying. And I think that's what it really, really boils down to. And I know on a past episode we talked about IPO and all that stuff. They patent this crap. They don't need to IPO anything ever. You want to talk about printing money? They're making fuel.
Yeah.
I mean, the fuel that goes into everybody's shit. Like, doesn't matter if you have a Honda Accord or whatever, and they're making the fuel.
Yeah,
man, that's game over.
Yeah, definitely printing all the monies.
So, and I'm sure they're thinking that way too. They're like, okay, there's a gazillion combustion cars still on the road. They're talking about people are going to have to scrap all these cars. They're like, no, let's think about a way we can keep these cars on the road. We'll just make a different kind of fuel where it doesn't.
Man, they're partnering with a global name in the first place, so that distribution's probably already taken care of.
Exactly.
Stations are already there, all that type of thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's going to be even pumped the same way. Like, so it's just basically change the other crap out and put this crap in it. Like, in the tanks. I mean, win-win. Just cost a little bit more. Who cares? Okay, and then all right, you want to run EV? Fine. I mean, there's still a cost associated with that too. I mean,
that's your choice. You have two choices. You're
run this
electric
fuel,
or you're not.
Yeah, and you know what? This may price some people out because people are like, "Well, gas is already expensive. I'm not going to pay, instead of $3.70 a gallon, I'm not going to pay $8 a gallon." And that's fine. That's understandable. But those of us who don't care will probably still do it because we still like the sounds. We still like our race cars. We still like our fun cars, and maybe it'll start to slowly dwindle down, and we'll see more EVs because of that, because of just the pricing of people out with fuel.
Possibly, and then the other side of it would be that it actually levels off because they're able to produce it in mass quantities, all that type of thing. Maybe production's
yeah,
cheaper.
but I don't like they didn't get into like if it costs them more to like refine it.
It's probably the easiest process. Probably
it's actually probably cheaper. Yeah, it's probably like cheaper.
Somebody's like,
but they're just going to charge more for it because they can. Who knows? Pretty awesome stuff. Nevertheless, I thought that was very, very important to bring up. I was very excited about it when I read this. And that's why I wanted to give you as much detail as I could about it because, man, that is...
They're going to run on the LMDH?
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, we'll see what happens after this series, right? I'll report back once I hear more, but that's what I have with it right now. So exciting stuff. Next thing. EMSA apparently writes articles. I had no idea about this. This is news to me.
Not just a race series.
Yeah. So they had... You know, and the reason why I bring this up because obviously it was a pretty interesting read regarding the 911 market. Obviously, we know it's a hot market that goes without.
We'll put the article in the newsletter coming out in April.
Without being said, we all know that. However, and within this article, I think some of the biggest takeaways that I had. So it was an article roughly talking about the 911 market and how hot it is and how it's continuing to stay hot. But not just air cooled, all 911s in general. And again, some of the biggest takeaways that I got from it was a very lengthy article actually, but some of the highlights that I got, the cliff notes for you guys, they brought up the bounce back duration, and what I mean by that is, okay, the car depreciated for X amount of years until it hit its bottom, and then started its bounce back on the retrieval to start basically getting something where you're getting some equity in the car. So it kind of took a couple of different examples, and there's a lot. It's not just opinionated; it's actually like numbers based. There's validity to this. So 911 SC, in comparison, took nearly 30 years to bottom out. So it took that long for it to. So it was declining essentially for 30 years straight. So everybody's listening and following, and then it started its bounce back, meaning it started to like tick back up, where it's not losing money anymore each year. It took a 30-year loss basically, and then started turning around. Which,
the classic status.
Yeah, which is kind of a long time, right? But moving on, more interestingly enough, the unloved 996 in comparison only took 15 years to bottom out. So it depreciated for 15 years, and now they've been bouncing back. Obviously, we know, we've talked about it, and they're starting to gain momentum. They're much more pricier than they were last year and the year before that. So they're turning that tide around, a 996. So half the time in the 996, which is, and I find that to be very interesting because you're shopping air cooled, but 996s were unloved for so long, and now their bounce back was in half the time of a classic 911 essentially. So moving to the next category, and the final one, was 997. Their bounce back was even less than a 996. So they depreciated for about 9 years, and now they're gaining money. You have a 997. So I find that to be interesting. And so each generation, and we're talking about something relatively modern.
I feel like everybody's trying to guess the next classic.
That could be part of it.
I think there's two things. The first thing is we all saw the air-cooled market, and as it continues to do, it's going up. So the water-cooled cars and the older stuff is still at a price point where the old air-cooled stuff is at. So that makes it appealing in that sense. We also have all the social media and all the forums and everybody that keeps talking about, well, you know what this is going to be. You know, this is last, 996, first generation like this. Everything, throttle cable, all that stuff. Hope 997, I like looks of a little bit more, still got some power stuff to it, still hydraulic steering, all that stuff. Yeah. Let's do that. I think it's a couple things at play, but it's good to hear that all the boats are rising, I guess. And you beat me to it. I was going to ask you, why do you think this trend is shortening? And you hit the nail on the head where my headspace was. And I think one of the real big reasons behind it is the same things you reiterated, but I'll just kind of like elaborate a little bit more. The water cooler.
I think the that's part of it. I wasn't going to mention that, but I think what it really is that we joke around a lot about it, but the reality is the price is the price. And what I mean by that, it was the air cooled, where people are maybe even younger people or older people. Maybe it's their first 911 or it's not their first 911 and they've been in the game in a long time and they don't value an SC at $65,000-$70,000. So they're going to take 50 of it or 60 of it and go buy a 997 Carrera S because they value that car to be more, because maybe they think they deserve more for their money, which is understandable because it's your money, so you can basically move it around however you want. And what I mean by that is they are thinking, okay, well, if this classic costs this much, I don't really feel like if they don't feel like a classic person and they don't feel like that car gives them the vibes that they want and they don't care about that, they're like, this newer car has way more horsepower. It's still manual. It still has a lot of those feels, but it's just a better refined thing than that thing. It costs the exact same as that.
Yeah,
so
what I'm
getting at it is,
value.
and I think that is pushing some of this 996 and 997 mark, and that's just my opinion. Not saying that they're bad cars. I think they're great cars, but I think because the classic market has priced a lot of people out, or not priced them out in the sense of, okay, I can't afford that, but price them out in the sense that that money doesn't make sense to me.
Yep.
Where now they're shopping, and we've talked about this many, many times before when we play this game of like, well, if you had $150,000, what are you shopping? Because what it ends up doing is, yes, they're not the same cars, and they're not even close to being the same feels. You're never going to get the same feel that you get from an air-cooled that you do from a water-cooled. And they both do different things, totally different things for you. One's going to be quicker around this way, the one's going to do something like this, but you're going to get different vibes from that. We all get that. But what I'm getting at is maybe those vibes for each one of those cars don't really matter for that person. Now they're just shopping for basically price. They're like, look, I want a 911. I would have loved a classic 911, but I think my $55,000 is better spent on a 996 turbo or a 997 C2S or whatever it is.
Yeah, $55,000 turbo, 996 turbo, you're doing really good right now.
Yeah.
That's another thing.
Or, $60,000 SC that needs a lot of work. And if you don't have that strong desire to be a classic kind of guy, and that doesn't really do it for you, I can see why this has changed that market a little bit, those 996s and 997s, because they're kind of classic 911s too, because they haven't got the real bulkiness where it got when it stepped up outside of it, when it went 991 and they started getting really chunky and all that kind of stuff. And I get that.
No electric steering. There's still, you can still almost call it, well, you can. It's still, now it's classic, but it's classic water-cooled.
Yeah. And the second one I support what you said is, I think we live in a different era where information travels very quickly now. Social media, all of those other things that we didn't have 15 years ago. Let's be honest. There wasn't Instagram. There wasn't all that stuff, where people weren't paying attention to all of this stuff, or just information in general travels so much faster nowadays. I mean, that's why paperback is dead. Stuff goes to print and comes out in one day, and now it's hit millions of people in an hour, as opposed to like, okay, well, we're going to get it delivered to you, then it's going to show up and all that stuff, and like
still happens.
People just want more and more and more.
I think the only reason they even do print is because the New York Times bestseller list requires hardback.
But I just think in general, like, they're still nostalgic readers, and I get that, but I'm not even going to go down that path. What I'm getting at is people want to consume more quicker. And I think that's what the second level of this is where people are reading more information about cars. Maybe guys that getting their first 911. Think about what you had to do back in the day, before social media and all these articles are printed on the internet and all this stuff. You had to go buy a car magazine. You had to go read about it. You had to actually do some hard research. Now you can go sit on your couch, have your YouTube going on in the background, watch videos of 996s, watch videos of old SCs. What I'm getting at is there's so much more information, so there's so many more people figuring out what they want right away and taking the dollars that they do have and applying it immediately to something that makes sense for them. So as opposed to before, we're like, oh man, I just don't have the time to figure out what's the right car for me. Oh, I'm going to drive my buddy's car. He's got one, so maybe I'll buy one because he's got one and he likes his. Maybe I'll drive his car and that's cool. And what I'm getting at is the process used to take a lot longer. Now things are moving a lot faster, so people are like, oh, hey, I want a classic car. Okay, well, I'm going to go hunt one. Oh man, there isn't that many of them. Shit, I better buy one. And I think it's a combination of all of this stuff. I think it's great for everybody who has one. It sucks for everybody who's shopping one. And that's always been the thing, is like, if you're a buyer, it sucks because you're having to pay a premium. And we've said it before on past shows. If you're on the fence, and Aaron's one of those people on the fence, and you know, we throw full disclaimers out there. We're always shopping cars. I'm shopping secretly a GT car, but I'm not really buying one. Like, hopefully I have to move some stuff around to make that happen, but I'm watching that market go up as in flames right now because it's going up, and I want a GT car, but I'm gonna have to pay probably 20 grand more than I had to pay a couple years ago for one, which is pissing me off internally, but that's a struggle that I have to deal with.
Yep. As
just
people
like
realize that they're better than they thought.
Yeah. Or the trends, you know, people start make money at different points in their lives. Who knows? You know, you have a lot of people in their late 30s, early 40s now that maybe want to reward themselves, and there's a whole gamut of reasons why this is happening. But the point is it's happening. You know, we can speculate all day why it's happening, and it really doesn't matter why, because we're here now. We're here and we have to deal with it. So what we have to deal with is, do you want to pay the price or do you not want to pay the price? It's that simple. It really is. And do you want to spend 60 on a air-cooled, or do you want to spend 60 on something water-cooled that you like anyways? But I always challenge somebody, buy it because you want it, not because you think you're going to make money on it. And you'll always be safe. Because if it doesn't make money, at least you'll still be happy with it, though, is what I'm getting at. You'll be happy with your purchase, as opposed to being like you bought it for the wrong reasons, because, as we said many, many times, never buy a car for investment reasons. That you'll always lose when you do stuff like that. But buy it because you're passionate about it. And if you were one of those people who passionate about an air-cooled, but you're shopping it, and it doesn't make sense to spend 60 for that, and you'd rather spend 60 on a 997 C2S, I'll be the first to tell you that a guy that's owned a lot of cars, you're still going to loathe to own an air-cooled, even though you bought that newer car. And guess what? By the time you just figure that out or realize that, the price has gone up even more. So if you really want an air-cooled, just buy an air-cooled. If you really want a water-cooled, buy water-cooled. Spend the money. Buy what you really want is what I'm getting at. Not because you're worried about this, you know, price point where, like, oh, I got into it, you know, I paid 55 or 60 for a C2S, you know, 997, and I drove it for 5 years and I made 20 grand. Okay, well, that's great if that happened, but if it doesn't happen, don't piss your pants about it, right?
The water coolers are going through the roof.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was interesting article through IMSA, and that attrition, I thought those numbers were interesting to bring up for people to actually to kind of like hear that, how fast that's actually happening. So let's take a quick break and then we'll be back. Thank you guys listening to PCar Talk so much. We appreciate you guys so much. I can't say that enough. Everything we're doing is trying to bring the community closer together. We definitely appreciate that. Also, when you go onto YouTube, you know, if you could subscribe, maybe pass it along, make a comment, we really appreciate that. Now back to the show. Welcome back. All right. So when you're listening to this, obviously it'll be April. So April's giveaway for our PCar Club members, we are going to give away a set of IMSA GTD rain tires from Michelin that was given to us by our good friend Jan Halen, race car driver for Wrights Motorsports. Now, these are display only, so don't try to like put them on anything. You'll be thoroughly pissed off if you do, I think. And I say display only because I think they're just a little old. They weren't display tires originally, but they've just been around, and I think there's some like cracking I've seen in them. And anyways, the point is somebody's going to get something really badass.
Cool.
And you could either make a table out of it, you could just mount them and say I've got like IMSA race tires, because I don't know if you know this or not, if you're listening, you cannot buy those.
Normally they get sent back to Michelin.
Exactly. So I don't know how we ended up with them, but keep it on the DL. So hopefully somebody will win them and they'll become their problem after that. No. But in all seriousness, you cannot buy any type of actual race tires unless you're in a race series and you can provide that you're in that series and you can purchase these kind of tires. Other than that, these are off limits to just kind of like
I just had a Pirelli's one time.
Commoners like us to just buy them for gee whiz, because honestly they're race stuff, and if you're not racing, they're not selling them to you, so there's no purpose in that. And then if you don't know, like Aaron said, a lot of these tires go back anyway, so you're really renting the tire, because what they do is they actually do R&D on these tires. If they want to know why some of these blister faster than others, so they go back and they do research on them. So this is a very unique opportunity to get some bit of race vintage stuff.
Local pickup only,
it's
right?
kind of Exactly, because they're huge. If you guys don't know that, like those race cars run very wide. Yeah, very very wide tires, and we're looking at
on
them
both
and
front and rear.
Yeah, they're monstrous. I went and picked them up this morning from Jan over in Dunedin. He messaged me he texted me and he's like, "Hey, you want these tires?" And I'm like, "Sure." I don't know what we're gonna do with them, but I know we'll find a place for them, and where our place is going to be is with one of our PCar Club members. Yeah. So, going back to what I was saying, cool man cave. If you want to just display them, you can make something out of them. You can do whatever you want with them, but they're going to be pretty rad for anybody who becomes a PCar Club member.
Did you drive the Cayenne over?
I did. I had to. That was the only thing.
I was hoping nobody wasn't like, "Hey, so here's some tires."
Yeah. No, I knew I had to drive that because that was the only thing they'd fit in. I knew they were going to be massive. When he told me, like, no one says, like, only race car drivers talk like, he's like, "Hey, do you want some Michelin rain tires?" And I'm like, I didn't think they were for, like, street use. They weren't going to be like some, like, thin.
It'd be funnier if you like brought them to far and be like, "Hey, boys,
I didn't think they were going to. Yeah, I didn't think they were going to be like 265, 35, 15s or something. I knew they were going to be massive.
Big boys.
Yeah, because he's a race car driver. So I get there, I pick him up. So, anyways, all you got to do is join the PCar Club membership. How do you do that? You go to pcartalk.com, click on membership, and become an RS member. And
join the club, I think is what it's labeled as. But
yeah, join the club. And as if you haven't been paying attention on other episodes, we are rapidly dwindling down our membership. We don't have that many slots left. We're only taking 100. So if you want to win these tires and be eligible and be one of those lucky hundreds that get something, and many, many more that have already won stuff, you can become eligible that way. So 100. I encourage you to join.
Good odds.
And if you go there and you're listening to that and you can't join because it's all full, it'll say waiting list, and you'll go on the waiting list, and you won't be a member, but when you can be, we'll notify you when you can be. So that's this month's giveaway. I think we have given away awesome stuff. Don't get me wrong, and I'm not discrediting anything that we've given away from a price point standpoint. I mean, we've given away stuff that's like $1,000, like a watch or whatever we've given away, and we've given away $500 stuff. But I think this is really cool in the sense of if you're an enthusiast and you understand the significance of like how rare it is to have something like this. I think this is one of the cooler giveaways that we're giving away, just because they're actual race tires from a GTD race car, and it's from a Porsche on top of that, not just any race car.
But you know what?
You can't buy this stuff. I don't.
Probably Daytona.
You can't buy these, which is really, really cool. And most of the stuff we give away, it's some of it you can buy, some of it you can't. But most of the stuff, I would say 50-50, you can't buy it. But you really can't buy these anywhere. It's not even just like, oh, well, it's limited, and you just can't get these. So, and we're just going to give them to somebody. So that's pretty cool. So enough about that. Let's move on. I know we're 9/11 biased. We get a lot of troll comments on it a lot, and we deal with it, and we just kind of delete them or whatever we do with them, right? Like give them a thumbs down or tell them to F off. But we understand. We get it. Like there's more stuff in the Porsche lineup. We know that. We're well versed in all of that stuff. And we want to highlight a vehicle, a 912. Why am I bringing up a 912? Because on Gator Crawl a few weeks ago when I was there, a buddy of mine just picked up a 912. He's got multiple 911s. Talking about how fun of a car it is. I've always thought they were fun cars. We have a good friend of ours out in California that specializes in 912s, John Benton. And Benton Performance. They do a very, very fantastic job with 912s out there. And people who have 912s, there's a big cult following behind them as well. Yeah. They're a pretty loyal group. They all know each other. And they have some pretty rad cars behind them too. And just kind of wanted to highlight that and kind of bring that up for a lot of people that may be listening to the show that have no idea and don't know a lot of background about a 912. So they were made from 1965 to 69, and then there was a one-year run in 1976 with a 912E.
The economy.
Yeah, I think it was for electric fuel. Nice try over there. But anyways, so the first gens, the 65 to 69, have a 1.6 liter flat four from the factory, and the 76 was a 2 liter and had electronic fuel injection. So I think that's what the E's for.
That's the E's for.
Yeah, I know that's what the E's for. And the interesting thing about the 76E, the 912E, is that it was actually a pretty low production car. They only made 2,092 of them, which in the grand scheme of Porsche, which is very rare. I don't like using that word rare. Let's just call it low production. That's what it is. It's a low production car because you do see some for sale. Whether they're rare or not, that's debatable. But you can't deny the fact that it's a low production car. So it's a cool car in a sense. So if you don't understand why the 912 exists to begin with at all, it was kind of a more affordable way for Porsche to sell cars in 1965 if you didn't want to pay up for a 911. It cost about $3,000 less than a 911 at that time. Which is a significant amount of money back then.
Oh, yeah.
I think 911s were going for about $10,000, and you could pick one of these up for about $7,000. So that's a big difference. I mean, that's expensive for 65 anyways. I mean, so
yeah.
Think about that. But anyways, and it was also pushed off as, because we were, not in 65, but towards the end of that, we're moving into a gas crisis situation, in the 76. It gets 30 miles per gallon at a 20-gallon tank, so you're getting about 600 miles per tank. So you're getting...
That's a lot.
Yeah, so essentially you're getting a 911 body car. Yeah, it looks like a 911. Maybe doesn't perform exactly like a 911, but it still handles well. It doesn't get any less handling.
Yeah, it's just a different motor.
Yeah. So, and there's some little things that, like, the sway bars are a little, like, maybe not as strong as a 911. There's some stuff there. But nowadays, if you bought one of these, it wouldn't take you much to put some good handling into it and make it what it needs to be. So it was a kind of a cool car, a unique car. Obviously, it was, and if you don't know what and I give you the motor specs, it was a flat 4 still. So instead of being a flat 6, it was a 4-cylinder. So it still kind of like paid homage to basically that heritage of being a flat engine, boxer style engine, but it was just 2 less cylinders. So people will say, well, it doesn't make a lot of sense. These things aren't that fast. 912s, the theory behind that is it's not really, you buy the car because it's quick. But with that being said, that doesn't mean you can't make them fast. Early cars weighed about 2,100 pounds. That's crazy light.
Yeah, that's super light.
And that's factory. So if you took all the junk out of it, you could probably cut that 100 pounds, 120 pounds, make this thing about 2,000 pounds.
Or less, yeah.
So granted, it didn't have a lot of power, but that's why you have John Benton. He's a master at this. You send the car over to him. He's pulling about 130 horsepower out of these engines now with the stuff that he does to them. So to give you perspective, you're like, oh man, 130 horsepower now in the modern day doesn't sound like anything, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like crap. So I put this into a quarter mile, calculator, and not these cars aren't made for a quarter mile; they're made for cornering and all that stuff. But just to put it in perspective for you, 2,000 pound. Now this is a Benton Performance engine with 130 horsepower. Does a quarter mile in 15.6. Doesn't sound staggering, but it's not slow. And a good comparison for all you 911 fans, including myself, and Aaron, this would be good for you to hear. 1985 911, so a G-body Carrera weighs about 2866 in pounds. Has 207 horsepower, a whopping 207. It runs a quarter mile in a 15.1. So it's only a half a second faster than this 912 that I'm talking about. Now, granted, to be fair, that's a bone stock Carrera, and that's a little bit of a stripped down,
a little bit more performance oriented.
A little hot rodded 912. Yeah. But it wouldn't take you much to get a hot rodded 912 is what I'm getting at. So the reason why I bring this up is because 911 prices are so high. Now, there are 912s that go for a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. We have been seeing it. Like, some of them have been going nuts. But what I'm getting at is there are still some deals to be had within 912s. If you're not one of these people that cares about having the name and the cachet of the name and these big speed guys and all hunt this stuff down and all this crazy stuff, 912 may be an option for you. I'm just saying, think about that. If you're a nostalgic type of person, you like this vintage stuff, maybe hunt a 912 because you are getting the vintage 911 body still, and it's a momentum car. Don't get me wrong. You're not going to blow the doors off anybody, but if you don't care about that stuff, this may be a car for you people out there that are hunting these cars that are still kind of on the outside, that are still trying to get into the air-cooled club. Because
doesn't Patrick Long have a 912?
He does, and he's a race car driver.
See?
And guess what his other car is? 356. And I know that's slow too. So
he just loves it.
Yeah, and this is a guy who goes fast for a living. So I'm just saying he's one of those guys that enjoys the drive, and he loves those cars. Absolutely loves them. And guess where he took his cars? He took them to Benton Performance, and John did some stuff to his 912 and woke it up and did some things like that. So with the combination of a low production car, it not being dog slow if you do some stuff to it, relatively comparable to like a 911 of the mid 80s.
You're really not going to know. I mean, unless somebody tells you that it's a 912,
Yeah.
I mean, virtual sound would be something, but.
And then on the flip side of this too, what I was going to say, if you did do what I was saying to that 912 to make it what it was, and even if you hadn't modded or whatever, but if you modded it to that, 90% of the cars, and I'm talking to all the cars and coffee warriors that are out there, you know who you are, there's no shame in it, but I'm calling you out.
Yeah.
That don't go out there and don't do any track days, and you just kind of putz around, and you want something that looks pretty, and you just want to have a vintage car because you do like cars, but you do have a life, and you do all this other crap, and you got a family thing, and you do all this stuff, and you're not like this hardcore mountain driver. You're none of those things. Your second to third gear pull on a car that has 207 horsepower, it nearly weighs 2,900 pounds, and then if your other car, the 912, is 2,000 pounds and has 130 horsepower, you're not going to know the difference. You're not, because they're going to basically behave about the same, because that weight to power ratio is about equal. And actually, the 912 may pull a little harder because it's so light, and the quarter mile doesn't lie. So my point behind that is why I say second to third, because that's where you're going to be in most of the cars, second to third, when you're putzing around town and you're doing your things. And that car looks like a 911. It's probably going to sound a lot pretty good. You put a good exhaust on it. I mean, flat fours still sound good. And you got a vintage car. So it's another option out there, is one of the reasons why I bring it up. And clearly we talk about 911s too much, so I kind of wanted to bring and show some light on a 912, a forgotten relic, essentially. And also wanted to tell you about a 912, because you're hunting air-cooleds, aren't you? And I'm trying to save the show here, so maybe you want to buy an air-cooled. Maybe you're a 912 buyer now.
I don't know. I have looked at it. I feel like I'm just like one of those brand people. I get stuck in it, or I'm like, I'll go to have 911. But I have looked.
Because you are like such a road warrior, right? Like you're in the mountains tearing it up, and you're on track. And makes sense. Makes sense why you need a 911. Totally makes sense. I get it. Probably dry the wheels off a 911, wouldn't you?
All day.
Yeah. Yeah, 912 wouldn't suit you.
Nope, couldn't see it.
You're too hardcore for a 912.
That's what it is.
Way too hard. Actually, I was thinking about shopping a 912 myself, because I just think they're super rad, and I kind of want one.
That'd be a cool compliment to what you have.
I want one that actually is pretty tattered. I want a lot of oxidation on the paint. I almost kind of want a patina monster.
You wouldn't know what to do with something. You don't have to fill up every 3 days.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Everything I have just like literally drinks gas.
We were talking about that earlier. Yeah, that's 76.
This is okay.
Yeah.
So like, not to jump too far from topics, we'll close with this again. So like a little sidebar within this. Like, if you're a listener, you're used to this. The best fuel efficient car in my garage right now, which is insane to say, is the 964. That's insane. With all of the stuff it's done in the 964, because a 76 Safari, because of the PMO carbs on that thing, and that thing being punched out to a 3.2, drinks as much gas as the Cayenne V8 that's on freaking all terrains as well.
That just shows you how efficient the Cayenne is. Yeah,
exactly. It makes me respect how efficient it is compared to that, because I mean, it literally drinks gas. And then I have the Turbo S, which is just a fiend for gas too. It's like a crackhead. So I mean, I can go fill up at the gas station, which is like 15 miles away, and come back home and a quarter tank is already gone. And I'm like, what in the hell just happened? It's like, I was thirsty. And I was like, yeah, I know.
Time travel.
Exactly. But circling back to 912, great car. I actually kind of want one of these, because I always think they're pretty rad, but I don't want to buy like a blue chip one, and I'm sure you guys have seen them going on Bring a Trailer for like $60,000, $70,000.
Yeah, they are.
Even higher.
Money.
Especially the ones in special colors like Irish green or a Bahama yellow or any of those things. Some of those are bringing like 80, 90. Fully sorted cars. I'm talking about full restoed, like cherry. I don't want anything like that. I want something that's used. I want it to work. But I wouldn't mind if the entire paint situation is all oxidized. I actually prefer that, because then I would leave it outside, and then I would daily drive it, which would be phenomenal. Nice. And then I would get actually good gas mileage for a change. Not that gas mileage matters, because I basically only leave the house to go to the gym. However, I think it would still be rad to have it, because it's a very historic car within Porsche's line, and they're never going to see one again. They're never making these again. I mean, 76 was an anomaly for them to pump that out, but 65 to 69, they kind of, again, Porsche was very new in making cars then. It was almost kind of a consolation to get people to buy more cars.
Do you think it's the hidden gem in the air-cooled market right now?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say because what I just said, there's some really expensive ones still out there. What I do think about it, what I do agree with it being a gem, I don't know if it's hidden so much as it used to be. I think a lot of people know about them, but I think
all the gems.
But I think a lot of people react. Don't take this the wrong way, like you do to them. I think they look at them and they're like, "Well, we're a 911, it's a 912," and I think they're rad. Something to be said because if you have that old school DNA, and a lot of, we probably don't have a lot of 356 listeners. I think the only one that probably listens to us is Mark Urbanik when his 356.
Oh, we got Sharon and Mike.
I don't even think they listen to the podcast, to be honest with you. And if they do, thank you. And if they don't, we'll never know anyways. But I think it carries a lot of that lineage because there's a flat 4 and a 356. And it kind of like is a 356 continuation, if you want to believe that into a 912.
That's actually going to be one of my questions. But did they have motors left over and then they decided to make this, or they decided to make this as it was because of an affordable option?
I don't think it was a leftover situation. I think it was one of those things where when you have factory workers like in the factory making stuff, I think there was a knowledge thing. Like they already knew how to do this. They already knew how to make these motors. They already had the casts for them.
Yeah.
They're making the casts. Like when I think it was a bridge for them to phase out those casts and almost kind of say, hey, well, we were only making 356 flat 4s. We just started making flat 6s in 65.
Yeah.
So I think it was a bridge till that took off. So, and if you look at it, it was a 4-year span.
Like that,
It was a perfect, I mean, it was executed perfectly for them as a car manufacturer because they're like, okay, hey, we're going to sell these side by side because we still have all the molds for those engines still, but we're making this new engine, and until everybody catches on for this new car, then we'll give it 4 years and then we'll stop making these flat 4s and we'll only make flat 6s. I think that's basically, without being there, I think that's pretty much what the conversation went down for. And, which a lot of people may not know, a little history tidbit, and I think we've shared this on prior podcasts, but if you happen to miss it, there was a huge fallout when they switched to the body of the 911 in 65 from all of the 356 faithful, because it was a flat 4 for a long time, and not even from engine standpoints, from an aesthetic standpoint. And it's what I've been told. Obviously, I wasn't alive during that time frame, but some of the old timers have told me that there was so much up in arms about it. It was similar to the effect of the 996 with the water-cooled when they went from air-cooled to water-cooled. It was that strong of a feeling of people like, well, that's not a real Porsche. Real Porsches are flat 4s, because you think about it, all that stuff before that, they were racing with twin cam engines. All the stuff they had was flat 4 stuff, really. A set modified, the really high end stuff, maybe like the 906 and the 908 that they were running cars. But that wasn't for consumer stuff. They were talking about consumer stuff. That it was 356, and everything in a 356 was a flat 4. So there was that huge fallout when they went to a flat 6, and they changed the body style too. So it was a dual thing, kind of like the 996.
Lots of change.
Changed the headlights, and now we're water cooled. What the hell just happened? Like, people are having aneurysms. So very, very similar car within that range. So, and it was a very short lifespan. And I think maybe that's why some of its faithful like it so much. We know a couple people that have them. Our good friend Kevin has one. It's beautiful out in Newport Beach, Bahama Yellow. It's a phenomenal car. But he also has a 911 RSA. So, but he likes both. And I think they're both rad cars. If I were you, I would consider one. I know where you were at because you want to be able to be at speed on these rallies if you participate. And there's a lot of speed on these rallies. But I think maybe having one of these, if you had a souped up engine and stuff, could be rewarding, because honestly, like in the mountains, this thing I would think have plenty of power to be able to do what it needs. Like, because on the twisties, like you would just have to learn how to drive it.
Yeah.
Like you would have to learn how to carry speed. Like you'd have to be fearless, because it's, I'm sure, just as low on torque. The problem is like if you screw your brake zone up and you apex wrong, you're probably going to come out way slower than you obviously would on a 911. So you're going to be saved on a 911 with power, obviously. Yeah. But what you lack on power, you make up for on lack of weight. So something to consider. everyone else out there, something to consider too. If you're shopping 911s, like, think about it for a minute. It's a possibility. If you don't care about the cachet and like Aaron and have to be part of the club and, oh my God, I got a 911. It's like all the places like at Gator Crawl, there was somebody with a 912 there. Nobody looked down on them. I thought it was rad. I spent actually a lot more time looking at that car because it was
You don't see
the
it.
most, not, I wouldn't say rare, but it was rare in that bunch because everything else is there a 911. Everything's hot rodded. And this was kind of a bone stock 912. I would have probably hot rodded it a little bit more, but you know, it ran in the slower group, which it should have. But it ran, and it's, I would say, era correct. It ran with 356s that were there because it's kind of a 356 in a way. So if you did go to Targa or you went to any of these rallies, that's the class you would be in. You'd be running with those cars.
P.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, you'd probably be faster than him. So enough said about that.
He's probably got less weight than I do.
Yeah, but your car probably put down more power, though. Anyways, I wanted to share that because we're always talking about 911, so I wanted to tip the hat to the 912 people and say, hey, keep on keeping on, and we appreciate what you're doing, and we like the car, and we're not just 911 guys. And I'll try to talk Aaron into buying a 912, which I don't think he will.
Well-rounded.
But maybe I'll end up with a 912 someday because I do think they're super rad, and I would love to bomb around town on one, and actually one that's kind of beat up. So if you want to sell me one at a good price that's beat up, hit me up. I want an early one. I don't want a 76. I want a 65 to 69. So
Oh, nice.
let me know. But I don't have anything else for the folks. Do you have anything?
Nope.
All right. I hope you enjoy the history lesson. You guys have a good one.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of PCar Talk. Connect with us on Instagram at PCar Talk or online at PCarTalk.com.